Hello, and welcome to the fourth installment of this honesty and acting project that I'm working on. I decided to be outside today, just since it feels good out. So we're gonna experiment with that. I'm trying to decide how I want to approach this. Like I've said before, I'm working through this book, Martha Beck's The Way of Integrity. I recently finished chapter 4. I also just had my fourth acting class today. I didn't do a scene today. I'll be doing one next week. And yeah, there's things I want to pull from either one. So I guess I'll start with the book. And the chapter is called The Only Way Out. And this is all about confronting things that we are in denial about ourselves and in our lives. I'm going to pull from a few spots that I've highlighted just to kind of give a sense. But she says to continue along the way of integrity, you must go in among the secret things, that is, the things you've been keeping from yourself. Emerge from specific areas of denial that are allowing you to live outside of your integrity. So it's basically just confronting parts of ourselves that we don't want to deal with. And talking about how denial is, she says denial is involuntary. It's not like we're trying to be in denial. It's just we're trying to protect ourselves from, well, we think we're protecting ourselves from these parts of ourselves. So it's about acknowledging what we don't want to acknowledge. And it's actually a lot harder than it seems. And one of the ways in which she says you have to do it is, she mentions this a few different times, but she says that you have to find a way to kill your own cowardice. And in that way, confronting these parts of ourselves that we want to be in denial of does take considerable courage. It takes vulnerability to face these aspects of ourselves that we don't want to. So one of her exercises is what she calls the do not mention zones. And there's multiple steps. And basically we're, as automatically as possible, trying to list the things that we just don't want to talk about. And those might be, she says, topics, people, past experiences, world events, etc., that we don't want to think about. So this is kind of our way into these things that we've been in denial about. And then eventually she has us work our way into one specific piece, one specific topic or idea that we then kind of work with. And I had a whole list of things, filled up half a page of different things I could work with. And what I landed on ultimately distilled down into a phrase: my troubling but not devastating do not mention topic is that I'm unkind. That was a distillation of a few different things, but so for anyone who may be watching this and who knows me, that might come as a bit of a surprise, or people might think, what, he's not unkind, he's such a nice person. And that brings up a few things for me, and I explore a little bit of this in this work, but one of the things is that there's a very distinct difference between kind and nice. The phrase that has been circling me for the last few months that I heard recently is clear is kind. And of course what that means is that without being hateful, without being antagonistic necessarily, or intentionally antagonistic, being clear with people about how you feel, where you stand, setting healthy boundaries, all of that. that's ultimately an act of kindness, because for one, you're being honest with that person and more transparent so that they know where you're coming from. And it's also kind to yourself because you're not sacrificing parts of yourself to accommodate someone else, to people please, things like that. And the kindness to the self part is a big piece of it for me. What's interesting about uncovering this topic among many topics that I don't want to talk about, the core of it came from how unkind I am to myself. What's interesting is that it actually ended up parlaying into the ways in which I'm unkind to others. And by that I mean how judgmental I can be of others. And I feel like the way we treat ourselves is also a reflection on how we treat others, and vice versa. The harder we are on others, the harder we are going to be on ourselves, and vice versa. And obviously, we're our own worst critic. That's a popular phrase, and I think that's mostly true, but I think that there is some connection between those two things. And so for me personally, and I think this will end up parlaying into some of the acting stuff, into the acting class a little bit as well, more on a larger scale. So for me personally, I never really knew that I was unkind to myself. I never gave it much thought, to be quite honest. And if I had been confronted about it, without having the journey that I've taken, I would have thought, if someone had asked me, are you unkind to yourself? I would have thought, I think I'm fine. But I have a partner, a life partner, who has really helped me understand the ways in which I'm considerably unkind to myself, and even a bully to myself. So, that's been a whole personal journey that I've taken. And I think for me, my, conditioning or my messaging, or however you want to call it, has led me down a path that has said, ultimately that I'm not enough, and that I need to work extremely hard in whatever I'm doing so as to be better, to grow, to learn, to achieve all of these things. But it's coming from a place of scarcity. It's coming from a place of lack. And that's always how I thought I needed to move through the world, to kind of always be bettering myself, to always be, also to be at the top, to be manifesting the fullest of my potential at every possible, in every possible direction. So, understandably, being kind to myself doesn't really fall into that very well. So what's been interesting for me, of course, over the many years that I've been kind of processing this, is the realization, of course, that in some ways the irony is that someone's going to end up being a lot more successful and really much more happy and fulfilled if they are able to find a way to be kind to themselves. Oftentimes people will say, treat yourself like you would treat your best friend or your life partner or someone that you really, really love or care about. And that's a helpful framework, but I think a lot of this stuff goes very deep, and the surface sort of phrases are only so helpful. So taking this idea of being unkind and kind of working it through, processing it through these steps in this exercise has already been really helpful, because it's the ways in which she asks you to kind of dive deeper into it is really eye-opening, and allows us to get to the core issues behind this, whether it be core fears or, or core traumas, whatever it is. It allows us to access where these things actually are rooted and where they're coming from. She says, obviously, we can do this process with any of these sort of, as she calls them, do not mentions. And it can be a lot, and it is a lot. It was a lot to kind of go through this. And it does take some real courage to be vulnerable in this way. But that's the only way to really move through this, is by facing these things. And here you go. She says, thinking about them deliberately, asking these hard questions, brings you straight up against your own personal hellgate, she calls it. And by that she means, so she actually references Dante's Inferno throughout this, I think, the Divine Comedy, I think. That whole story is ultimately about this kind of process. And so the hellgate is, you reach this place where it's dangerous beyond it. I think in the book it's called, let me see if I can find the term that they use in the book is, well, I'll find it eventually. But basically it's a dark forest of the unknown, and it's a place that we don't want to go, but that we have to have the bravery and courage to go past that, into sort of past the gates of hell, our own personal hells, and process these things. And I'm looking through here to see, she has some great kind of meditations too around surrendering, around trust. The idea of like trusting that in this moment, in this exact moment, we can be okay. And I think I'm realizing now that she parlays this meditation in with this work, because I think pulling a lot of this stuff up can be very intense and very hard. And so we also need to balance that with grounding practices and calming practices to be able to get through it. So the way this connects for me with acting is, I guess, twofold. One is on a sort of micro level and one is on a macro level. The macro level is that well, to put it bluntly, I think I've felt for a long time that acting seemed like a selfish endeavor. I think the idea of really taking up space in that way, and also on some level of doing something that I really, really love, felt wrong. I think, again, because enjoyment felt counter to being a better person. Again, consistent with this sort of unkindness to the self. So just these last month or two of taking acting classes, and also experiencing film and shows and theater through the lens of aspiring to do more acting, has been really helpful to me in understanding a deeper part of myself, that this is something that I feel called to, I feel drawn to. And what's refreshing is that, and maybe this is because of my age and because of the life I've lived, but what's refreshing about it is that I can say with honesty that, like, I don't really have a lot of career aspirations with this. I mean, of course, it would be cool if something materialized from this, but what I'm learning more and more is that this practice of acting, again, it's not only confronting me with myself in a deeper way, but it's just it feels very resonant, it feels very exciting, very nourishing, Even just going to class like today where I didn't have a scene, just watching the actors do their work and the coach helping facilitate them through that process is so fascinating and nurturing to me, and again, just very resonant. So that's a truth of mine that I have been, I think, putting on the back burner for a long time. And there's a lot of aspects to it that I haven't wanted to face. I guess at some level too, you know, connecting with the being unkind to myself is the piece that being good at acting is pretty ephemeral to me. I mean, I think we know good acting and we know bad acting, but I think most any actor will tell you too that developing the tools to become a good actor is kind of elusive in a way. There's obviously all these different methods, but it's different than, like, you know, being good at math or even a good musician. Like, we have seemingly clearer ideas of what it looks like to be good at those things. And the thing about acting is that, and this is where I think it really shows up, is that, let's say you're a great piano player. Well, we see evidence of someone's technique or experience through what they're doing. The better they are at that, then we witness that, we see that. With acting, it's almost the opposite, where we don't want to see someone act. We don't want to see them trying. We want to see effortlessness. We want to see, you know, an organic and natural experience. We want to be lost in the character and lost in the story. I think about this actually too. I recently watched a movie called Sing Sing, incredible movie about a theater company, based on a true story, theater company that was developed in the prison system. And I noticed about 3/4 of the way through the film that I had gotten totally lost in the film and the stories and the character. On the onset, I was watching it, thinking about the shots and thinking about the acting, just because I'm interested in those things, and because it's just such a well done film in all the ways, I got swept up, and so I don't notice anything. I don't notice the music. I don't notice the acting. I don't notice the even the shots necessarily. It's all in service of an experience, and which that's kind of feels like a separate subject, which I'd love to get into. Just the idea of really sort of suspension and even trance, like people kind of being in a trance-like state, which also parlays into acting, because I feel like, and I've had a handful of experiences with this in acting where I don't even know what's going on. I feel like I'm in a bit of a trance, and I'm just in this flow state where I'm not even aware of the audience or myself. And I think in a lot of ways that's what actors are looking to achieve, is that sort of the sort of transcendent state, that trance-like state. So I think I just spent all this time on the macro level of how this all connects to my acting, but on the micro level, I feel like, especially with regard to like being kind to myself, is the idea of trying and pushing. Last week when I did my scene, there were moments where it was clear I was acting, and the reason is because I was pushing and trying, and the teacher called me out on that. And then the second time felt more natural and more in flow. I also felt like I was had less control, and it was better. So there's this almost paradoxical dynamic to acting that I find incredibly fascinating and very challenging. And I think, to wrap up, this idea of not being great at something and having to learn especially this seemingly ephemeral art that is acting, it's bumping me up against the idea of like, how do I let go of trying to be good at it and just enjoy the process, enjoy being in it, because I do genuinely enjoy it, and I do feel like I have some of the natural tools to be able to access these things, whether it be emotional intelligence or connection with a scene partner. But there are definitely barriers that I'm up against around that, and because again, in a lot of ways I'm very much a beginner as an actor, and as a 43-year-old person, that doesn't feel good to the part of me that wants to achieve and wants to be great, So, being kind to myself, I think, is a key element to success in that. So, diving deep with that, among many other topics that I don't want to face, it's just going to help me as an actor and a person. And I do plan to dive into a couple of these other topics, the do not mentions. And finally too, an actor has to face so many different aspects of themselves. They don't know what kind of role they're going to get. They may have to face some real dark parts of themselves, and the more they're able to do that as a person, the more that character will shine through and feel natural and feel believable. So anyway, that's my piece for this part, and we'll see what the rest brings. Thanks.